Hello, and welcome to Unity Church on the Mountain from Lake Martin. Today, the title of the talk is Power. But before we start the talk, let's begin by affirming together our opening statement. There is only one presence and one power in my life and the universe, God. Together, let us take a deep breath and release. Another one in, nice and easy. And let us affirm together the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And leave us not in temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. So the title of the talk is Power. Power is one of those words we hear quite often in our daily lives. And I can remember, it's one of the 12 faculties of mind, or one of the 12 powers. And even when we say the power of power, we're using power in two different ways. When in common use of the word power, we think of things like horsepower, the power of a motor to do work. Or we think of power like a domineering personality who has power over others. But that's really not what the spiritual faculty of power is. That spiritual faculty of power is our ability to have control over our thoughts, to have control over our consciousness. Pure power is found in the silence. Pure power comes from God. It comes from Spirit. It is pure potential. We begin to form it and give it intention. And you can see here how the other power, our other faculties of mind begin to come into play. In pure power, we're in that place of faith. There's that place of understanding there, discernment, all working together in that potential. We begin to bring our will into play as we decide how the power will take form, and our power of imagination as we visualize putting that power into action. And then we have the expression of the power. We have strength coming into play to hold us to course after our will decides what our intention is. Our power is that ability within ourselves to keep our consciousness, or to transform our consciousness to match that intention. The strength holds us on that course. We have the power of elimination to get rid of any ideas that come in that are bringing us away from that decided path and bring us back to center. The zeal, the energy that we have to do what is necessary to keep us on that course. So you can see how the powers or the faculties don't operate by themselves. Power is just one of 12. And all 12 work together to bring us through our spiritual path, to realize, to express what is ours to do in this universe. For the past 2 weeks, we've been talking about trauma. Trauma is a very good example of putting power and the other faculties into use in our life. Because that's what practical Christianity is about. We're not interested in beliefs. We're not interested in talking about. We're interested in how or what can I do to bring about a realization of that kingdom, that perfect kingdom on earth that we talk about in the Lord's Prayer. In the Lord's Prayer, we also talk about power. It's one of the very last things that we affirm before we say Amen. Thine is the kingdom and the power. All power comes from God. All power comes from Spirit. All power comes from Source. There are different ways that we can put that power to use in our life. If we don't put power to use in our life, power is undeveloped. And when our power is undeveloped, we are at the whim, we are at the control of others who have their power developed. And that brings me to the second use of power, which is from the ego, which is generally what we think of when we think of a powerful person dominating others, controlling others. They put that power to use for their own self-benefit. As we increase our vibration and we put that power into spiritual practice, we're using power to maintain our own consciousness. And yes, that does affect everything around us. But it's not in a controlling or manipulative way. It is a free expression of spirit in this universe. So, and that's what happens as we put power into play, as we integrate traumas. You see, our thoughts work in patterns. Our minds are the neurons that make up our brain and our nervous system, begin to form habitual patterns. This starts early in our life. And a trauma can easily, let me say that differently. A traumatic event can be internalized as a pattern in our consciousness, in our neurons, that begins to repeat over and over if it's not integrated, if it's not accepted as part of us. Because as we accept it, that neurological pattern begins to lose its ability to be triggered by some external event and repeat itself. I want to tell a short story about a fish, since we're at the lake, that demonstrates how these neurons, and neurons are just the cells that make up our brain and our communication system within our body, how these neurons become habituated. You see, there's a fish called a pike. And a pike is a game fish because it puts up a fight. But it really loves to eat minnows. So they did an experiment in Berlin, Germany, with a pike. And they placed it in a tank, and then they put minnows in the tank with it. And as you might expect, the pike ate the minnows because it loves to eat minnows. Well, in the next stage of the experiment, they placed a non-breakable glass in the tank, and they put the pike on one side of the glass, and on the other side of the glass they put minnows. And as you might expect, the pike swims towards the minnows and hits the glass. And it did this several times. It would swim towards the minnows, expecting to get a free dinner, and it would hit the glass and was unable to get to the minnows. And it did this several times until eventually the pike realized that it couldn't get to the minnows, and it stopped hitting the glass. So there's been this pattern of thinking that this pike learned from over and over hitting the glass. So what do they do next? They remove the glass that's separating the minnows from the pike. And now the pike is surrounded by minnows. And you know what? The pike no longer is interested in going after the minnows. You see, its habitual pattern has changed. This is very analogous to the patterns that develop in our own consciousness, in our own patterns, in our neurons, in our physical structure of how we think. But power is that ability to change our consciousness, to pull us out of habitual patterns, and to begin to develop a new pattern. If we're on a spiritual path, we're going to be looking to truth. We'll be looking to that inner guidance that Jesus called the kingdom of heaven, or the counsel of heaven, if we look to the Aramaic for a more direct translation. When we begin to look to that counsel from Spirit, we begin to see a different path, and we can call on our faculties of mind, including our power, to make a change in our consciousness. And this is what happens when we begin to become aware of that trauma, and we shine the light of Spirit on it. We are calling on power, that power that comes directly from Source. And it is unlimited. When we align ourselves with that guidance from Spirit, we put ourselves in the flow, and all of the power in the universe unites behind us to help us along that spiritual path. When we're dealing with trauma, remember, we can expect to see that triggering over again, because Spirit is giving us the opportunities to align ourselves back to center and shine that light again. And all of this helps us develop resilience. Resilience being that ability within ourselves to experience things on the outside that normally would create trauma on the inside, and not have that trauma develop. That's our resilience. Without that resilience, we have an unconscious, or you might say subconscious, reaction to that external event. And I heard a funny story released recently, and it's a true story. I'm going to tell you 2 short stories that relate to how this subconscious or unconscious thinking can bring us into a behavior that, if I'd have just thought about it, I would have done something completely different. But those habitual patterns within us just begin to express. So we end up being a lot like that pike. We begin to be a lot like a fish. So the first story, there was a criminal who went into a liquor store. He pointed his gun and said, "Give me all of your money." And so the clerk, the attendant, begins to put the money into the bag that the criminal has given. And then the criminal spots a bottle of scotch on the wall and says, "Put that bottle of scotch in the bag too." And the clerk says, "I can't do that." And the criminal says, "Well, why not?" The clerk says to the criminal, "I can't give you that bottle of scotch unless you prove to me that you're over 21. So the criminal just becomes flabbergasted and is in a momentary state of shock. Reaches into his pocket and hands the driver's license over to the clerk. And the clerk looks at the driver's license, hands it back, and gets the bottle and places it in the sack. The criminal leaves and goes on his way with his loot, and the clerk picks up the phone, calls the police, and says, "I've just been robbed. This is the name of the robber and his address." Only hours later, the criminal is arrested. What was I thinking? Giving my driver's license to the clerk of the store I just robbed. And that's a true story. And here's another one. It's just as funny and also a true story. So there was a lady who was in her new car. She parks it and goes into the store, and she comes out and her car has been stolen. She calls the police and says, "My car has been stolen, but it has an onboard phone." So the criminal in the car hears the onboard phone ring, picks up the phone and answers. And the caller says, I am calling in response to your ad. We would like to buy the car. Can you meet us at such and such a place?" And the criminal says yes. So they go to the place to sell the car and are arrested. What was I thinking? And the answer is that unconscious, that subconscious part of the brain just naturally responded. So they weren't really thinking. So that those patterns that are within us can do things or cause us to do things that we wouldn't do if we were aware of what was going on in our consciousness. So we have different techniques that we can put to use. And they all are results of our 12 faculties of mind. We can use affirmations, which call on that power of love to attract to us those thoughts that we affirm. We can use denials to give ourselves the room to bring in that affirmation. Denials call on our faculty of elimination to get rid of that cycle of error consciousness that is bringing us away from center. We affirm truth. A truth that we have gone into the silence with our faith, our understanding, our discernment, and gathered that truth. We've operated with our will to decide, our strength to follow through, and the power of it is then realized as we affirm that truth to change our consciousness. It's really beautiful. We don't even have to think about all of those steps. We just have to do it. But some people, I have heard, think that these 12 powers are sort of artificial and they really don't apply. But this is a good way of seeing that they actually do operate. And they generally, in my experience, always operate together. It's very, I would say almost never that a single power, or I should say faculty, right, if we're going to use that word correctly, operates by itself. They operate coordinated with one another to bring about the greatest good of spirit. All of those faculties can also be used without spiritual awareness. And then they can bring us to a state of lower vibration, to a place that is not on our spiritual path. I've got a song that I want to sing for you. It's a song you've probably heard me sing before. Oh, but before I do that, I want to remind you, you can get on YouTube and search for Unity Church on the Mountain, and then pull up the videos. Click on the Videos tab, and you will see that there are several different talks where I have taken two of the faculties of mind and described them in detail. So if you're interested in knowing more about these 12 faculties of mind, that's one place that you can go to find out more about how we can use these 12 faculties in our daily life. The song that I want to sing is called Protanoia. And protanoia is a Coptic word that means first thought. It is that initial vibration that is the ongoing creation, that is the I am that I am. The word, that word which is milta in Aramaic, it is an ongoing process of vibration that is the creation that we each take part in every moment of our life. So, this song uses the word protanoia. It's a Coptic word. It's feminine gendered. And that's part of the reason that I think it came to my consciousness as a song. That feminine gendered first thought came at a time when I was dealing with all of these male gendered ideas of spirit. Milta, the Greek word even. Milta is the Aramaic word. The Greek word is also feminine. Milta is feminine. So we have this idea, all the way back to Genesis. Male and female. Created they, them. We are each, all of us. And God, that image that we get straight from source is two genders in one. We can't operate in this world in a harmonized way. We can't be in that alignment with spirit without both. So protanoia helps us to remember that. It helps us to remember that all of this comes from the silence. We can spend that time each day, whether it's dedicated, set aside time in the morning, or as we take spirit breaks throughout our day, to go inside and find that still place that is the silence, and know the presence of God in our life. So take this time as I sing as an opportunity to move from that masculine and thinking side to that more receptive and open feminine side, and just allow Spirit to flow through you as you listen openly and not thinking about the words. You can do that later, because this is a recording. So taking a deep breath, we open to Spirit. Let there be light. That dwells in the light, movement that dwells in the all, invisible one within thee, all protonoia, protonoia, protonoia. I am a voice speaking softly. I exist from the first. I dwell within the silence that surrounds every one of them. Protonoia, protonoia. And it is a hidden voice that dwells within me, within thee, within me, within thee. Silence she is, called by three names. Although she dwells alone, since she is perfect. Protonoia, protonoia, protonoia. Some of you may be thinking, well, this is all really nice and fine about this faculty of power, but is that really what Jesus teaches? Where is that in the Bible? Well, I'm going to share a scripture, just one verse with you right now. This is from the Aramaic translation by Dr. George Lomsa. It comes from the book of Matthew, chapter 12, and it's verse 37. For I say to you that for every foolish word which men speak, they will have to answer for it. Whoop, that's the wrong verse. Let's start again. For, that's why I got confused. For by your words you shall be justified, and by your words you shall be found guilty. So what we say has the power to either lift us up into that justified, or to drag us down to the earth into that guilty. That power centered in our throat expresses through our words, through our consciousness, through that vibration of creation that we all take part in, that is the ongoing creation. And we are that expression in this universe. Let us take this opportunity to close with the prayer for protection. And remember the line, the power of God protects us. Because we've been talking about power. That power protects us from our habitual patterns of error thinking. What was I thinking? The light of God surrounds us. I am the light. The love of God enfolds us. I am the love. The power of God protects us. I am the power. The presence of God watches over us. I am the presence. Wherever I am, God is, and all is well. Thank you.